the first, yeah, welcome everybody. My name is Christina, and this is the first of our Tour of Faiths for the month of July. This is one of our signature events that everybody really enjoys. We found out last year that most actually do enjoy having this be virtual because they're able to tune in whenever they can. They don't have to drive and battle any heat or weather or anything like that. I'm gonna do a quick video. And it's been a while since I've done a video to share. I'm like, it's been a while since I've shared a video. Here, we're going to share my screen for a second. And share sound and optimize for video clip. And I'm going to go here. So you should see this on the screen, correct? And I'm going to go ahead and play. This is a short video about what Atlantic Institute is and does. So you should be seeing the video clip.
The Atlantic Institute is a nonprofit organization dedicated to promoting harmonious coexistence between peoples of various cultures, faiths, and backgrounds. We seek this goal through peaceful dialogue, education initiatives, and community organization. Our dialogue events bring together experts, community and faith leaders, and knowledge seekers to address social issues that affect us all. We feel dialogue is the most important element in peaceful coexistence, so we try and maintain several panel discussions, TED Talk events, and book clubs throughout the year. These events touch on social issues, race relations, and cultural understanding and are a mainstay of our programming. The Atlantic Institute's education events are extremely important to our mission of understanding. We want to promote socially forward critical thinking to students of all ages. To that end, we have developed programs that seek to grow the creative spirit of students and help them think about their communities and the world around them. Our Future Leaders of Dialogue event brings together nominated elite students to learn from each other as well as political and business leaders. Our art and essay contest gives students a theme about important societal issues and allows them to create wonderful works of art and writing while steering their minds towards improving their world. We're always seeking ways to educate youths and adults in order to make a peaceful world for all of us. Our community events are designed to transform neighbors into friends and groups of people into a community. By associating with other nonprofits or by our own initiative, we are always trying to discover new avenues to improve our neighborhoods, places of worship, and community centers. We host cooking demonstrations of food from other cultures, work with various nonprofits to help elevate the work of others, and try to find a way to make the lives of those who are disenfranchised or marginalized better. Building a more peaceful world starts in our backyards, so we are dedicated to improving our communities and associations. The Atlantic Institute is always seeking like-minded volunteers and collaborators. If you would like to learn more, find volunteer opportunities, or just want to chat with our staff, please visit our website at www.atlanticinstitutesc.org or follow us on Facebook. We will never run out of fun, educational, peaceful events, so come join us to help make this world a better place full of understanding and unity.
And with that, we will go ahead and stop sharing the screen and come back. That's just a little overview of what Atlantic Institute is and does that I'd like to share with everybody. And now I will go ahead and turn us over to Mila. I don't know if I'm saying that correct.
Mela.
Mela. Okay, I'll turn this over to Mela. And she is a minister of the Awen Grove I don't know if we say church or organization, but she is here to tell us all about her faith that she has.
All right. Hi. Thank you. I am Reverend Pamela Borowski. I go by Mela, and I am a local pagan minister in the Columbia Midlands area. I facilitate full moon ceremonies every month for the community, as well as lead the Awen Grove Fellowship, which is a pagan community. And I wanted to share about summer solstice and about how pagans celebrate summer solstice, because we're in the middle of summer, we're in the middle of all the heat, and I thought that it would be a good introduction to what pagans are doing around this time. So, to start, I just want to share an invocation that I've done at summer solstice with you. I'm going to light a candle. The sun is the ultimate source of fire and light. Like all sources of light, the sun shines brightly and spreads around the world. Even as it gives its light and power to each of us, it is never diminished by the sharing of that energy. The sun passes over us each day in the never-ending circle of light. Great and powerful sun, we honor you and thank you for the gifts you give. We celebrate your light as we begin our journey once more into darkness. So it is. This month, pagans around the world celebrated one of our high holidays, which is often called Litha or summer solstice. It's also known as midsummer, Awen, and lots of different names in a lot of different places around the world. So summer solstice, midsummer is celebrated by many faiths and cultures. It's not just a pagan holiday. It is celebrated by earth-based spiritualities as we honor the cycles of nature. And nature is really a deep part of the pagan faith. That's why we're called earth-based spirituality. We honor the cycles of nature. We follow the cycles of nature. And summer solstice, it is the longest day and shortest night of the year. It is the exact opposite of winter solstice, which is another very important holiday for paganism. Our southern hemisphere neighbors, of course, are celebrating winter solstice at the same time we in this side of the world are celebrating summer solstice. But here in South Carolina, where I live in the northern hemisphere, in 2021, summer solstice was 11:31 p.m. on June 20th. So this past month. So if we're focusing on the energy of this time of the year, our focus is on the sun and its power. And we see fertility all around us. But we're also aware that winter is coming. So as we follow these cycles of nature and we're celebrating this warmth and this heat, we do know that as we get to autumn, as we get to winter, that winter will return. That's the cycle of nature. But here in the summer solstice, we have this very deep connection with light conquering darkness. Even if we know darkness is going to creep back around at some point, we still celebrate. And it's really all about life. I have a garden outside. When I see those vegetables growing, when I see the flowers blooming, I sometimes sit at my window and watch the butterflies and the bees. I have butterfly bushes in my front yard, and it's just full of life. In June, early in June, I walked outside and the noise of the bees buzzing was almost otherworldly. I tried to record it. It just wasn't the same. So there is a magic at this time of year that's different than any other time of year. You can feel the life that the sun gives you and the presence of land spirits. You may hear about fairies at this time of year. Fairies are a type of land spirit, tree spirits, they're dancing. It really feels like magic to me. And regardless of what you believe, we are still honoring the sunshine in this time of year and the life that's all around us in our own way. So midsummer is really magic to me. Now, it is thought that most ancient cultures celebrated the summer solstice in some way. And a lot of the customs and traditions have been borrowed and shifted from different cultures. Ancient Celtic people would light bonfires on the hilltops, and they would dance around the fires. In some places, the villagers would come to those fires and scoop up the ash. They'd take it home, and they would use that as a protection for their homes. So fire, that's our earthly representation of the heat of the life-giving sun, right? So it plays a huge part in midsummer celebrations. Now, if you have any questions, if you want to post them in the chat, I will get to them at the end. So please don't hesitate to do that. But I want to show you a picture and just talk to you about some of the ways that our ancient pagan forebears celebrated. So let's see if I can get this up here. So the Romans celebrated with a festival to Juno, and we have a statue of Juno here. Juno was Jupiter's wife and the goddess of marriage and women and childbirth, among other things. In fact, June, the very month of June, was named for Juno. And if you continue to even look at other types of gods and goddesses and things like that, I want to show a picture of another one. We have Vesta. So midsummer was also a time when Vesta, the goddess of hearth and family and the home, was celebrated with a festival of Vestalia. Offerings would be brought, and that's what you see happening here. Offerings were brought in exchange for blessings for their house. The Vestal Virgins, you may have heard of that. They were the priestesses of Vesta, and they had the duty of keeping the sacred fire of Rome burning. So again, we have that fire coming around in various cultures and times. In ancient China, the summer solstice celebrated feminine yin energy and the goddess of light. And even today, Chinese celebrate summer solstice as they honor the earth. And it's a tradition to eat cold noodle dishes, which makes a lot of sense because it's so hot. So they are having these cold dishes in the heat of summer. And as happened quite a bit when Christianity began to move into some pagan areas, holidays and sites and even pagan gods and goddesses were kind of rebranded. So summer solstice had this happen to it as well. And it became St. John's Day. It's around that same time, June 24th, and that is celebrated in various countries around the world. And when you see pictures of people celebrating St. John's Day in a lot of areas around the world, it looks like a pagan celebration. They're doing a lot of the same things that pagans are doing. Now, traditionally, it was popular to stay up on Midsummer's Eve to welcome the sunrise. I don't do that anymore. I'm too old. But sometimes people do that, and that's perfectly fine. But I do like to wake up in the morning and greet the sun on midsummer. It's a beautiful thing to see it rising up just over the line, the horizon. To me, watching the sunrise, knowing we're going to have the longest day of the year, even though I know winter's coming, to me, it's a sign of hope. And hope and peace and just that light conquering darkness aspect is just ways that I love to think about what's going on. So in some European traditions, they would set a huge wheel on fire. They would roll it down into a body of water. And in fact, the solar wheel, and I'm not sure if y'all are familiar with this symbol, so let me just show you a picture of it. This is a flaming solar wheel. Not all of them are flaming. You can get jewelry, necklaces, all kinds of things. They've been carved into stone. There are petroglyphs and various things like that with this symbol of the sun. And it's a great symbol for midsummer. And so you've got this fiery wheel, this actual wheel rolling down. The farther it would roll down the hill, the better the harvest would be. So maybe a big flaming wheel is not what we should be using today to celebrate. I don't know. I've seen it still used in other places. I'm not going to incorporate that into my practice because that might be a little dangerous. But fire in any form, even a candle, is very appropriate for this celebration. It's also a popular time to get married or hand fasted. Even for non-pagans, June is the most popular time for weddings. And it's a time when the bees are making lots of honey. And one of the names of the full moon, which we just celebrated, we just had, is the honey moon. Y'all ever heard of a honeymoon? And we've got all these marriages going on. We've got the honeymoon coming out at the end of June. It all kind of makes sense. In Sweden, we'll talk about today, they have midsummer. That's a big holiday. They'll decorate maypoles, they'll have traditional dancing. In the Tyrolean region of Austria, they've gone back to ancient traditions of bonfires, and they will light these massive bonfires on the top of mountains as the day ends. Croatians will use bonfires in their celebrations. In Latvia, they have a celebration called Jani, and it's celebrated on the summer solstice, and flower garlands are made. Flower crowns, like what I'm wearing, is used in a lot of different celebrations. In Latvia and Estonia and a lot of different places, they're very similar. They'll drink beer, in Latvia particularly, drink beer, go to the sauna, they'll sing, they'll dance, doesn't matter if it's raining or the sun's shining on that day, and they jump over bonfires. And I found a pretty interesting photo of, let's see, someone jumping over the bonfire. Now, I think she's a model, but she is showing what it looks like. I've seen lots of different pictures of the bonfire jumping. Sometimes couples will jump over hand in hand, and they will it binds them together. That's what they feel. It binds them together. People will jump over the bonfires to get rid of anything they don't need in their lives. So like a release, full moons are traditionally times of release. So this is sort of like that. So there are standing stones, and I don't know all of them, but I do know that the standing stones of Stennis and Orkney, Scotland, are one example of stones that align with the summer solstice. But the most famous that y'all have probably heard of is Stonehenge. It is aligned in such a way that in summer solstice, the sun rises beautifully right almost behind the heel stone, and it lights up the interior. And I do have a picture to show you. If you've never seen that before, they've been streaming it live at least for the last few years. I'm not sure if it's before that, but I've seen it the last few years. But here's a still picture of just how beautiful the sun is at Stonehenge. There's other places as well where things are lining up beautifully. On the Giza Plateau, I've read that at the summer solstice, the sun sets right between two of those pyramids. The Temple of the Sun at Machu Picchu, they have an area where the sun comes right into the entryway, and it doesn't have a roof now, but if there was a roof, the sun would light up the interior of that temple on summer solstice, and I believe at winter solstice as well, but I don't know for sure, but I know at summer solstice. And dancing is a huge part of tradition, and Morris dancing is something that you may have heard about. I've never seen it in person, but I've seen it on videos and on television many, many times, and it happens a lot at pagan celebrations. So I want to show you just a short video, just a short snippet, if you've never heard of Morris dancing, so that you can see what that is all about. So that's just a very short snippet of an example. You can look up if you're interested, if you want to see some different kinds. Sometimes they'll use sticks. I don't know much about it, but I would love to one day see that in person. And I know that it's done here in America as well. And I just have not been able to go anywhere where they've been doing that, but it's really beautiful. We also have Father's Day falling near summer solstice. And that's kind of perfect because if we look at the sun, now not every culture sees the sun as masculine, but in most cultures that have gods and goddesses, you have the god of the sun and the goddess of the moon. And so it's kind of perfect that you have Father's Day when we're celebrating this masculine solar energy. And as St. John's Day is around that time as well, there's a Russian version of St. John's Day. It's called Ivan Kupala Day. It looks very similar to what I was talking about with Latvia, the Yanni celebrations. As far as pagans such as myself, I talked about how we greet the sun. One of the things that we will do for different holidays is decorate an altar. So you might be able to see my altar behind me. And what I do is I will decorate portions of my altar according to the seasons. So I don't have my altar up right now for summer solstice as it has passed, but I do want to show you a beautiful picture that is just absolutely perfectly simple, which incorporates, you've got the oak leaves, you've got fire, you've got the green man face right over here. You've got the solar wheel. So this is just a very simple example of a summer solstice altar that a pagan might have in their home. If I were thinking about making an altar, I would consider flowers. I would consider oak leaves like you saw in the picture I just showed you, herbs, candles, maybe yellow candles, red candles, sunny or bright colors. I might paint or craft a solar wheel or that sun wheel. I might put mirrors to reflect light because it's all about light. I might make or buy a sun catcher. I might bake a loaf of bread in the shape of the sun or make cookies or decorate cookies. I've seen the beautiful cookies, the sugar cookies with yellow icing on top of them in the shape of a sunshine. I also love putting God's eyes on my altar. This is one that I made several years ago that I keep on my altar. It's a very simple craft, easy for anyone, including children, to do, and it's called a God's eye. There's also offerings that I give to my land spirits at this time. I do it other times of the year as well, but it is definitely a priority for midsummer. I have an outdoor altar and I'll go take cake or a cup of milk or something like that, bread out to the land spirits, which, as I said, can include fairies. I have a very deep respect for fairies. And my respect is that I keep a distance from them because they are not to be trifled with. That's what I believe. So I'm not out there inviting the fairies to do what they will, but I do honor and respect all my land spirits. So maybe no matter what your spiritual path is, you might have ways and traditions and things that you do to honor this season, this summer season. And it's really interesting when people start looking at their traditions, they find a lot of the things that pagans may be doing to honor the season. Gardening for me is part of my spiritual path. And just getting out and soaking up the sun and breathing in the sunshine is part of my spiritual path. So you might want to honor this season as well, honor the fertility of the land, and even just the excitement that summer is truly here. And so I just want to throw out some ideas that, regardless if you're pagan or not, some ways that would be awesome to celebrate this time of year. So, garden, we talked about that. If you have a garden, regardless if it's a pot on a patio or a huge garden outside or anything in between, this is the perfect time to do a blessing, a prayer of some sort on your garden. It's also a great time to bless your home because, as we talked about, these goddesses and gods of hearth and home and family were being celebrated at this time. It kind of makes sense that we're blessing and celebrating our family. Also, making flower crowns. If you have children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, adults love flower crowns. I did a retreat not long ago, and every lady there made a flower crown to wear for the whole weekend. So, flower crowns are very popular. That's a great thing to do. You could make a sun wheel of flowers, like a mandala. At the June full moon, we brought flowers one year and we created a wheel with the flowers on the ground and left it as an offering to the land. You could you could have people write on strips of paper, and you could, or even cloth, and tie them to the sun wheel and let it get passed around to everyone. And in the evening, their wishes or their prayers or their ideas that they want to happen, you can toss the whole wheel into the bonfire. So that's something that you could do at any point in the summer to kind of send your intentions or send your wishes out into the world. Now, here in South Carolina, we have a healing springs. I don't know if anyone is familiar with God's Acre. God's Acre is a healing spring in South Carolina. And so, as water and fire are important at this time, I mean, think about summer and how many people are going to the beach, getting in their swimming pool, playing in the water. So, water is a big part of summer. So, I was thinking that it would be a really great thing to go to your local healing springs and place an offering. Flowers would be perfect. So, taking some flowers as an offering to the energy or the land spirits there at the healing springs. Greeting the sunrise at any point, just getting up early, taking your cup of coffee or tea out there, and just saying thank you. Living in a state of gratitude is something that is so important for everyone. It changes your entire life. When you wake up in the morning and your first thoughts are, thank you for whatever it is, it absolutely changes your life. And so, walking out and seeing the sunrise at any point in the summer and just saying, thank you for rising, that is a powerful thing. You can make your own God's eye. There's so many videos online and instructional ways of making it, and they don't all look like this. Some are more rounded. That is such a fun thing to make, and you can do it with children. Like I said, it's so simple. And traditionally, these are made for protection. So you could even hang them in your home somewhere, put them out on your property as protection. You can make sun tea. That's something that's super simple. And you could host an outdoor party, a barbecue. See, you didn't even know that whatever you're doing regularly in the summer is really a way of celebrating the energy of the sun and summer. So it's perfect to do that sort of thing. Maybe you want to light a bonfire. Maybe you want to jump through them. Be careful with that. Could burn your bottom if you're not careful. I don't want anyone getting hurt. But when I did jumping the bonfire, I had everyone jump the smoke that was coming off the bonfire. That was much safer, but that might be something that you want to incorporate into your next bonfire barbecue. I don't know. Does anyone have any questions before we end? Let me see if we got questions here.
We have a couple of things I'll read. I know when you were speaking, Gail was saying, which I know is very true. I've been to Turkey, and I've seen in Turkey where when one faith came in, they would demolish everything. They would lay layers of sand over, and they would build new temples and new different things, or they would incorporate it. And so she was saying that the Roman goddesses such as Juno and Vestia were actually the ancient Greek goddesses with name changes because the Romans were copyists, not originators. And
absolutely true. And everything got copied everywhere.
And I've seen that a lot through history as well.
Mm-hmm.
So when they conquered Greece, they must have, she was saying, they must have said, great gods and goddesses, but lousy names, and called.
Yep.
And then she was also saying that June is a popular time for weddings because that's people only washed annually in a lot of places. And so that was also when the weather warmed up, they would wash and then they would get married because they were relatively still clean and fresh.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep. Then Caroline, I loved your input, Caroline, because you get to give us input from across the pond. That were you when you were in the Pressley Mountains in West Wales 3 days ago in Pembrokeshire, where they have shown that they showed where the stones from Stonehenge came from. And I will say, when I went to Turkey, I saw Göbekli Tepe, which is actually older than Stonehenge. And it was very fascinating to see. It was dug. They were digging deep down, and they were uncovering all of this ancient ruins because it was covered over in sand. It was ordered to be covered over, you know. And it was and it was so hot, and it was all sand around us. And all I thought of is, how did they get this all here? You know.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then she was also mentioning that May Day celebrations in the UK are often accompanied by Morris dancing displays in the towns and the villages, more common in the rural areas, connection with probably nature. And Gail was saying, was deism based on paganism? And she said, deism is believed that the only way, if there is a God, man can know him or her was through his or her works in nature.
There are pagans that are deists. I'm a pantheist myself, which is a little bit different, but I don't know if it's based on paganism, but I know that it very well could be. I don't know.
Okay. And then Caroline was asking, how did you come to enter the pagan community? Was it a journey for you?
It was most definitely a journey. I've been in the pagan community for about 20 years now. I'm 50 years old this year. And so I grew up in fundamentalist Christianity. I was a missionary overseas. I went to Bible college, all of that. And so it's really, I don't want to go into my whole story because it's just such a incredible journey. But it absolutely was a journey of me finding my authentic self, not trying to fit into a box that someone else was trying to put me in.
Right.
And telling me that I was wrong, telling me that I was, demon possessed, and all the stuff that happened to me. And I have never felt freer than when I stopped even practicing in private and secret, and went to school, became actual ordained minister, and began doing things in public in the community. I haven't felt as free or as my authentic self as I started doing that.
Yeah, which if you have never changed your faith from a faith that you grew up in, I think for some people it might be hard to grasp that, but some of us have, and there's a freeing sense of self that kind of comes along with that. So Steve, Morgan was asking, are you paid? How do you, I guess paid as a minister, right? And then how do you deal with the hostility to the name pagan? How many members are there in your faith community? Where and when do you worship, and what do you do in your services?
Yeah, those are great questions. As far as being paid, a lot of the things that I do, I take donations just like any other church would. So when I have full moon ceremonies, which I have every single month, and I have been doing that for almost 3 years now, rain or shine, I do it. And then with pandemic, we went online to do it, but I was doing it in person. I take donations and people will give me donations. But as far as a physical building with people that are supporting me, I don't have that yet. My community is largely people who come to things that they like and not coming every single time I'm doing something. As far as the hostility, yes, there is a lot of hostility, and I am extremely outspoken, so I get it more than others because I have chosen to do a lot of what I do out in the open. A lot of what I do is interfaith. My full moon ceremonies, I have people from all types of spiritual paths and religions that come because I use wording. I appreciate and honor all spiritual paths. And so I'm not someone who says you have to be pagan or you have to worship in a pagan way. They know I'm pagan, but they come and they appreciate what we can do there together, interfaith. So I'm very much interfaith. But I have had hostility, if you can believe it, even from the pagan community, because a lot of people for so many years have been so persecuted that when I started doing things in public, advertising things in public, um, going on television, I have a podcast, all these different things that I'm doing, and I'm saying, hey, I'm pagan. Hey, I'm a witch. I had people come to me and say, you don't need to do this. Someone's going to show up and gun everybody down in your circle. You need to do this in secret. You need to have closed circles. Do not do this. Do not do this. So even from within my own community, I've had people tell me not to do that and to talk to other people about how I should not be doing that. I've continued to do that because I feel very strongly about the message of just bringing people together and honoring nature. I'm not trying to convert anyone. It's just we get together and we honor nature. And if, something happens, something happens. I'm not going to cower in fear like so many people have had to do for so long. Yeah. I am a very resilient person. Yes. So I think that's how I deal with the hostility. Like that's a long, long way to get to my answer. I'm very resilient and I've gone through a lot in my life. And, sometimes, yeah, it hurts. I won't lie. People have nasty attitudes, honestly, about paganism, but I think it's because they don't understand it.
Right. I will say I have come to learn paganism is a relationship with the earth. Mm-hmm. and the sky. Mm-hmm. And I've learned that's where it exists from. And growing up Christian, my mother would always say the pagans were the ones that persecuted the Christians, and so they worshiped false gods, and this is what she was taught, and this whole thing. So it was always like, oh, we don't do any of that because that is a pagan belief, and that was against anything Christian. And that was kind of what we were taught. But I think as I've grown up, I've learned that paganism is actually more of a connection with the earth.
Yeah.
And it's having a belief and a connection with nature and with earth. And so there's but I tend to think that there was fear back during the Middle Age time, and there was all of this hostility back then because people didn't understand.
Yeah.
It was much, you can watch all these different TV shows that take place back then, and you can see where they blame a plague on the fact that not everybody was Christian in the town. Right. Like there was a different way. There was no understanding of germs were not distinguished. There was, clean water was not distinguished. Like there was certain things that weren't put out there. And I think it's interesting. So because it was an unknown, it was scary, so they thought we just killed us all off. And then, we let, and it was just kind of like my own belief system developed over time. I want to go back to some of these questions. Steve was saying, in view of the hostility you received in your pagan faith path, is there another name that you could use for your faith, such as naturalist, etc.? Then I'll just keep going for a second. Gail was saying, where there is hostility, it is generally out of fear of the unknown or anything different. After all, if there is a God, he or she, as portrayed, would not care what door people enter to worship, whether it's a single being or representations of a higher being, whether single or multiple. Steve was saying, does your community have the same human problems that all human communities seem to have? What are your community's main problems? And Caroline is asking, do you have creation or ways to understand how the earth came into being and to support life? Or do you look to science for this?
Okay.
So
All right.
I can go back through any of those slower. I know I kind of.
No, that's all right. I will go down and I will look at those. So as far as different names, paganism is a massive umbrella. And there are so many different spiritual paths under paganism. If you meet 100 pagans, every single one may have different beliefs. So under the umbrella of paganism, there are people who call themselves Wiccan. I'm not Wiccan, but there's Wiccans, there's Druids, there's Celtic shamanism as a whole. You've got Native American spirituality. You've got Shinto. There's just so many, Hinduism. All of that technically is under a pagan umbrella. Even if some people don't claim the pagan name. So yes, a lot of times we will say earth-centered or earth-based, that sort of thing. But it's like those names that people call you that get reclaimed. And so yes, I could choose to call myself anything else, but I'm reclaiming paganism for myself as not a bad thing. And I am using that, and I say we are a pagan community because it's something that people will understand more than if I made up something or found something obscure. So yes, you could, and people do. People will say we follow the old faith or the old ways. I mean, there's 1,000 different ways that people will use to say they're pagans. And when you get down to it, they'll finally say, yeah, we're pagans. We just don't use that. So definitely. Let's see. From what Gail said, there's something that I was taught when I was in school, that everybody is trying to get a path up the mountain. Everyone has their own path up at the mountain. The only people who aren't getting to the top of the mountain are the ones running around the bottom telling everyone else they're on the wrong path. And that always stuck with me. I really love that. And I tell it all the time because it just stuck with me. And that's kind of what I'm thinking of here. It doesn't matter which door you enter. It doesn't matter which path you take up the mountain, or you could, jump out of an airplane and land on top. There's so many different ways to the top. So we're
There's many different pathways to the top. Okay, so if we can get Steve's question, I'm just curious. It says, does your community have the same human problems that all human communities seem to have? And what are your community's main problems?
Yes, absolutely. And you see it everywhere. I'm in a lot of different pagan communities. My particular community online, I have about 150 members, but not that many show up to things. At the most, I've had 50 show up to events. At the least, I've had 5 or 6 people. It just depends on what's going on. But we have the same human problems, not just in my group. My group is very young. I graduated and started this only within the last 5 years. But I see things happening just like abuse of power. You've got favoritism. You've got people stealing the money, running off with the piano player, like all the same stuff is going on. We're human. We're all human. And if it's going on in one spiritual path, it's going on in the other. And ethics are extremely important to me. In my group, we have strict ethics. We have, I don't want creepy people creeping on people when they come to the group. So we watch out for that sort of thing. As an abuse survivor myself, I don't want my organization to be a place where that is tolerated, because it is tolerated in a lot of places where it should not be tolerated. And so we're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. And so, yes, absolutely, we have all the human problems. As far as what our groups look like, I've talked about the full moon ceremony. That's the one we do every single month. For Sundays, once a month, we meet. We'll have a meal together. We'll spend hours together, maybe 3-4 hours, having a meal, chatting. We'll have a circle group where I will, you might want to call it a sermon, but I call it a circle. I will talk about a topic and then we will discuss it. We will do prayer and healing with people if needed. And the kids will run around and play because it's a family thing. And that's basically what that type of meeting, Homestead Sundays, I call them. When we do rituals, which I do various rituals, including full moon, we do those outside around a fire pit. We have different types of things going on every time. This coming month, at the end of the month, July 24th, I think, I am doing a cord cutting ritual with everyone. I've done ancestral healing. We've done traditional release. We do something different every time. And then we jump in the swimming pool and we honor the full moon as we're floating in the pool, water and fire going on. So I hope that answers those questions from Stephen.
Thank you. I'm going to bring up, I was going to respond to Adrian, said Shinto and Hinduism are their own religions and shouldn't be classified as paganism. I just wanted to, I could let you expound on that, but I was going to just clarify that there are many faiths that have some shared strings through them. And I think that's more or less what you're speaking of, because then Gail was saying it's kind of like Methodist, Lutheran, et cetera, variations under the same Protestant umbrella. I learned a lot when I went to Turkey that some of the rulers would take wives of all different faiths because of the kingdoms that they ruled, and then they would incorporate all of those faiths into like one religion. It's almost like Christianity, the holidays have a lot of paganism woven into it, whereas people might not even be aware of some of the different things that are woven into some of the holidays have a pagan aspect to it, or have traditional threads through it. So I really think that's what more or less what you're speaking of. And I think perhaps that is why I think I've seen paganism come up a lot more in the last decade or so. I think growing up, it was like you never heard about that. And for some reason, it seems like in the last decade, I'm hearing it a lot more. I'm seeing it a lot more. I'm seeing a lot more like full moon ceremonies, or I'm seeing a lot more like summer solstice and winter solstice events. Have you seen an increase in people choosing the pagan way?
Oh yeah, absolutely. When I first began wanting to do something, or I wanted to join someone else's group in my area, I went to various websites. I went to Meetup. There was nothing. So this was probably within the last 10 years. Nothing going on. So I said, okay, I'll start something then. So I started a pagan group on Meetup. If you go to Meetup today, there is a pagan group, several pagan groups, fellowships, circles, covens, everything you can think of in every area of South Carolina. It has boomed in the last 10 years, and people are just coming just like they come to different churches for various reasons. They're coming to paganism for various reasons. And I do want to speak on the whole idea of Shinto and Hinduism being their own religion. Wicca is its own religion as well. So there's religion and there's spiritual paths that are under the paganism umbrella. And I do honor everybody's opinion. My own opinion, when I have done the research into what paganism is and the people who have taught me and the books that I have read, there are hundreds of faiths and spiritual paths and religions that technically are considered pagan. And if you look at Hinduism, they have gods, they have goddesses, they have a lot of the same idea of getting to a place of enlightenment. They honor the passing and cycles of nature. I cannot see how that is any different than any other pagan spirituality. People just may not choose to call it pagan. A lot of people, Shinto, Hinduism, Voodoo, like all that, they may not call it pagan, but if you defined it kind of in an encyclopedia way, it's going to have those threads, like you were saying.
Kind of like if you had a checklist and said, do you do
Yeah.
this? Do you do this? I mean, checklist oriented, it might not set well name oriented, but almost
Yeah.
checklist oriented would say, oh, well then it could be considered
Yeah.
that. Which I can understand, like thinking of it in like a different variant like that. I don't know if we answered Caroline's question. It says, do you have creation or ways to understand how the earth came into being and to support life? Or do you look to science?
One of the things about paganism, and I kind of mentioned it before, is that we have so much freedom. There's not a standardized dogma. There's not a creed. There's not a group that we look to tell us what we need to do and what we don't need to do. And so that in particular is every person's decision to figure out what they believe in that regard. Now, if you have a specialized group, like Norse paganism, they're going to have a mythology or a way of looking at creation. People who follow Minoan paganism, they have their idea of how it was made and their mythology or their ideas, whatever they want to call it. For myself, I look towards more scientific means, but I also, being a pantheist, I do believe that there is one overarching energy that put things into being. So I kind of mix science and my spiritual path as the source energy gave the push to get things going. So personally, that's what I believe in how things got going.
Wendy was asking, how do you understand why bad things happen to good people? All right, Steve, thank you very much. Steve has to leave, so thank you very much, Steve, for being on the call. All right, but Wendy was saying, how do you understand why bad things happen to good people, like pain and suffering?
That's the huge question that every religion and spiritual path is asked to answer, right?
Yes.
I know how I came to understand it, so I'll tell you how I came to understand it. I had a lot of terrible things that did happen to me, and that was my big question. And that was why I turned my back on the religion of my youth. I said, I don't want to have anything to do with a God or a divine being that lets all these terrible things happen to children, happen to people. I can't figure out how that meshes together. I can't figure out how my grandmother would die, my uncle would die, this would happen, this abuse would happen. And so I left any spiritual path at all because that was my question. How do you understand pain and suffering? And then at some point, I don't know, it was like that light bulb moment. The idea of cause and effect came to my brain. Now, later on, I realized when I started looking into it that there's a universal law of cause and effect that they talk about in the Kabbalion. But I just said, okay, cause and effect. You know what? My grandmother smoked since she was a young child, and she died of lung cancer. There was no power up in the heavens who looked down and said, I am going to do a terrible thing to your grandmother. It was cause and effect. When somebody gets hit by a car or a bad accident, a terrible thing happens, um, it's cause and effect. You were in a space that there was an effect, and cause and effect can be good, neutral, or negative. And for me, that is how I understand what's going on. I don't believe that there is, someone playing chess and making good and bad things happen. I think that here on this earth, bad things happen. Bad things happen to me. They happen to people I love. They happen all around the world. And almost every day I cry. That's how I release all this energy. I watch the news in the morning and I cry. And that's how I start my day because bad things happen. but it's by choice. We are sovereign beings and we make choices every single day. We can choose to react and we can choose to act. We can't control anyone else around us. And so if someone does something to us and we react by hurting them or whatever else is going on, that's our choice to do that. That's how I understand that question. And I don't know if it makes sense to anybody here, but it gave me peace to know that there are certain things that I'm in control of, but there are just some things that I'm not in control of. And this world has terrible people in it, and it has disasters, it has natural disasters, and the law of cause and effect, or the universal principle of law of cause and effect, was a lifesaver for me, and it allowed me to have a spiritual relationship again.
Do you have knowledge on the laws, what they are, by any chance? Like,
I can't name all of them, but I know
Sure.
cause and effect, and some. There's the law of polarity, the law of gender. I'd
The
have
law of
to.
attraction.
The law of attraction is one that gets added in. I mainly focus on the 7. There's some people say there's 21, and there's all different ones, but law of attraction is something that I know a little bit about. Law of vibration.
Law of vibration. Yes, I remember
that
learning
kind of
about that one.
yeah.
Right. I remember learning about that one years ago. I used to work with teen moms, and we would do a 3-day retreat, and we would teach them different tools in their toolbox to help them with coping skills. And I remember there was a few laws that were brought up for them to learn, which was one was like the law of attraction and then the law of vibration as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I just was curious if you could name a few just so it could jog my memory, because I don't think people, I think sometimes we ponder things, but we don't have a knowledge of that there are some universal laws in nature that can help answer some of our questions too. Gail was saying, why do we call it pagan at all? The word so often has a negative connotation. People often use it in a derogatory way, as if it was synonymous with ignorant. And then she also agreed that the book of Job was not an acceptable way of explaining why bad things happen to good people. Too.
When the word pagan was started, and I believe it was the Romans who started that, it basically meant, I think it came from the word paganus, and it basically meant, and this is my translation, but hicks from the sticks, like the hicks and the sticks who would not convert. So yes, it was very derogatory. And then you had Catholics calling the Protestants pagans, and you had pagans just is a word that has so much stigma to it. But there's a lot of words. Words are powerful, and there's a lot of words in our world and in our language that have stigma that should not have stigma, like mental illness or queer or various things, gay. And we don't have to let that energy remain on it. So why do we call it pagan at all? Why do I call it pagan at all? Is because I don't have to continue having that negative energy with that word. And maybe through me speaking and me saying in the various places that I say that I'm a pagan and people get to know me, they will understand that pagan does not have that energy. And yeah, we've got bad people, and yeah, that energy could be in some people. There's terrible things that happen everywhere. But as far as pagan as a term, it's a word. And I'm taking the power back, because words, prayers, spells, I don't care what you call it, words are power. And
Right.
I'm putting positive power into that.
Yes, I know words are extremely powerful. And I think when you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, because it's, we have this, sometimes we collapse words with meanings. And I always loved that explanation years ago. It was, there's certain words, but you've collapsed it with a different meaning. And it's like, you make it be this static thing. And sometimes it's not, it's very fluid, you know? And so sometimes redefine, some of these words are never going to leave our vocabulary. So it's like uncollapsing it and getting to learn what it is, you know, like I know for me, it changed it for me.
Yeah.
To get what it was and what it wasn't. You know, and I think something like everybody meeting you tonight going, oh, okay, so I can get that this is a peaceful, loving person, that is not dark and mysterious, and
Right.
how they might have viewed and thought they were programmed to think of what a pagan would be like. So
and so many pagans are still in the darkness. Like, they won't say that they're pagan. They don't do things in public. They don't come to public ceremonies. And so it's not getting told until recently, when people are starting to stand up and say it. And so now it's boggling people's minds, because all of this mystery and darkness that really was put on from people outside the pagan community, the light is being shown that that is actually a lie that was put onto those words and those people.
yeah, and I think it's important for everybody probably to even get to that. Everybody is at a different learning path of their spiritual path.
Yeah.
I think that might be I've hosted the Tour of Faiths for four years now, I think. And I think my biggest takeaway from all of this for the past few years is that everybody individually has their own belief system. And you can't judge a whole faith on one person that you meet. You have to continually meet people of that faith,
Right.
because everybody's at a whole different journey in their trauma, in their healing, in their, that takes a lot. There's a lot of healing and trauma and past to make them who they are. And so, okay. And Gail said, by the way, but she did not mean to question why you use the term pagan, but more why it must be used in a negative way. And so I think society is just always.
Yeah, it's just how it started, and it's just stuck to it.
Yes. Thank you. Okay. So do we have any other questions? I think I'm occupying a lot of dialogue here. But I can only tell you it's because I've got it now. I've done this for a couple of years.
I think the main thing that I want people to understand about paganism is, like what someone else was saying, you have Christianity, but under Christianity, you have Protestant, Methodist,
Right,
and then,
right.
under Presbyterian, you have USA, PCA, it's like you have all these different belief systems. Paganism is like that, but even broader. We have everything from someone like me that is, I use more shamanistic type things and maybe more druidic type things, all the way to someone who is practicing what some people would call voodoo. So, and it's all, such a huge thing. So you can't meet one person who calls themselves a pagan and think that the next 1,000 people you meet that are pagans are even going to be practicing the same way. I just want people to understand how broad of an umbrella it is.
Yeah, and I think just like there's a lot to learn in Christianity, there's a lot to learn in paganism with setting up an altar or different rocks and what different meanings are and different healing things. And I think sometimes some of us cling to a certain path and learn a lot more about it. It's not what makes each human unique. So you might meet somebody that's pagan that knows a lot more about healing stones, and you might meet somebody that's pagan that might know a lot more about crystals, and you might meet someone that's pagan that knows a lot more about tinctures and different things, because that's just what they're into, what draws them, and what's provided the most healing, I would say.
And my specialty under that whole shamanism type thing is I do journeys, I do path working. That's how I go and meet with the gods, the goddesses. That's how I find answers, insights. So if someone wants to know about path working, I'm the person that they come to. If they want those rituals and those things that are taking place and healing that are taking place and that sort of thing, that's kind of my specialty. But you're right. The next person might be all about crystals, and the next person might be all about doing things in the kitchen and cooking and using their magic in cooking.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. So does anybody have any last questions? It's going on almost 8:30, and I'd like to just go ahead and wrap it up. And I'm hoping that you've all learned something. Caroline, I hope it was worthwhile staying up an hour. Drink a little extra coffee or tea in the morning.
Thank you.
And I will tell you all, tomorrow evening we have our next dialogue at Tour of Faith, and it is with the Scientology. So it's learning about what Scientology is. So if you have not signed up for that, feel free to sign up for it. It is quite an interesting thing to learn as well, I will say. If you guys would like to go ahead, let me remove the spotlight here, because I know having your face front and center really stinks sometimes. Let's go back to, I think I'm on gallery view, so hopefully that means everybody's on gallery view. Dana, I think, if you guys would like, if you don't mind, I can just go ahead and make sure that Mela has your emails, and if you would like to, like Dana said, she would like to participate in a full moon ceremony. She can email you and let you know when her full moon ceremony is, if that works. So if anybody would like to go ahead and unmute and like become a person instead of a name, you can go ahead and do that, and you can thank Mela and say goodnight if you like.
Mela, I wanted to say thank you. Thank you very much. And there's a community up the road from my village, which I will actually be at tomorrow, called Coyd Hills Rural Arts Centre. And I know they've got a community there, and several of the things you have talked about, I know are going on up there. So I'm going to find that really interesting to speak to them. I know they've been doing ancestral work and some of the other things that you've said. So I've got a much better start to dialogue with them. They use tinctures. They're just like wonderful, wonderful people. So thank you for that. That'll help my dialogue with them.
You're very welcome. Thank you for being here.
Because in our community, we are a rural, I don't know, maybe a little bit posh kind of community, and there is some distrust of this community. I've lived here for 25 years, and that broke down for me 20 years ago. I love the guys, but it's a work to be done, and it plays into some of the things you said. So anyway, enough from me. Thank you so much. I am off to bed. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night. Anybody else have anything they'd like to go ahead and add and say before we're done for the evening? I feel like this just went so quickly and nice and wonderfully. I just want to
thank you, Mela. It was wonderful as always. You did an awesome job.
Thank you, Robert.
Hi, this is Steve. I'm in Seattle for the summer, so I am surrounded by a similar community that you have described. So thank you for your information.
You're very welcome.
Very cool. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and stop our live stream on Facebook. Anybody's welcome to watch that over again if you need to. And I'm going to go ahead and stop